key. People don't have an understanding of empathy. These buzzwords in business, emotional intelligence, they
Yeah.
are failing
Absolutely.
across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And everybody likes a post about equality, and it is failing. It absolutely is failing. Now, we go back a long way, and we're having a conversation at a time where the news worldwide, including here in Australia, is showing a lot of what's going on in America.
Yeah.
We're seeing protests, we're seeing police brutality, we're seeing that on all forms of social media at the same time. And I really just wanted to have a conversation with you. I want to have a conversation with you about this. I think for me, this has, over the last 2 weeks, brought up a lot of emotions for me. And it's been interesting because I've been trying to nail down why I have all of these emotions. My experiences are quite different from the average person who isn't African American. Just because my history, as you would know, and how we got connected in the first place was, almost 15 years ago, I decided to move to the United States and didn't really know too much about the demographics, the cultural landscape. I didn't know any of those things. I've just come from Australia and moved over there thinking it was exactly the same as over here where I've grown up. And I moved to where you're at right now in St. Louis and decide to start some school programs. And so at first it seems like, wow, I was really, everything seemed quite normal to me. And then suddenly I started to realize, hang on a sec, this is really, really, really different from where I've grown up. And there were things that were written about me, calling me the N pastor and, bussing in, derogatory names of people from the community, from these type of communities into this area. And I couldn't believe that this was even happening. I had no idea. And so from there, going through this whole journey, it was something that, really, really shocked me to my core.
For me, a lot of the places that I've been at have been in places where people have position and power to create change. And I'm not seeing the leadership to create change. And so what we're looking at, unfortunately, is a lot of passive aggressive leadership. So, stripping down all this stuff, when we strip down all the riots, all of the pain people are going through, all of this is people crying out for leadership and crying out for love. That's what it comes down to. It's people feeling like they don't have a voice because they don't have a voice. And those desperate people are out on the streets, they're rioting or looting, and it impacts the economy. It has so many negative implications. So for me, like when I look at my story, I feel like I actually, a lot of it, I kind of would numb over time. And, my first experiences was I was at a pool and, me and my brothers were playing, and this is our first encounter remembering really the fact that we were different than other people. And we're just playing around with the kids or wanted to play around with a couple of kids. And they said, we can't play with you. We said, why? Because you're Black.
Wow.
And it's just, this is the diverse community, one of the more diverse communities in St. Louis. And, that's the type of thing. So there's just story after story. I am calling on the leaders of the communities, the leaders, because what happens is people think that this stuff doesn't, impact them. Well, guess what? When stuff explodes because of a lack of leadership, it impacts the entire global economy. It's bad PR. It's bad economics. It's bad for your business. It's bad for the next generation. It's all bad. And so when people are passive and leaders are passive that are running, small businesses to billion-dollar companies, and they're not actively looking at how to create change and love people and lead people, we see this, and it's unfortunate that it keeps happening, but we have to get real with each other.
So as time starts to progress, I begin to then notice little things, and some of them are just a little bit under the surface, but some things are really obvious. And so when people start calling you really extreme derogatory names publicly, then those are the obvious things. And it got so bad for me that even though I had a large organization in that region and in that area, I stopped going to this grocery store and the restaurants in that area. I would drive from Columbia and I would go to West County or Chesterfield just to go do my grocery shopping because I felt uncomfortable where I was. Wow. And that was how I felt. And because what's happening now in America, nothing new about this. There's been protests before, there's been people shot which shouldn't have been shot. Ferguson, Missouri is not very far. I mean, this whole thing kicked up while I am in an East St. Louis lockup. And I still remember one of the guys who was in there who became a friend of mine. I was friends with all of them. And he yelled at one of the guards and he said, "Black Lives Matter." And as the guard's walking away, he yells out something. And I think this would probably be the best description for me of the rhetoric and the language that is used. And he replied back, "Blue lives matter too." And I just thought to myself, that wasn't the statement. That's not the question. No one is asking whether it's an either or situation here.
Right.
And that to me highlighted really what's going on. And their assumptions of me, even though they don't know I'm an outsider, not necessarily, I'm sure that judge knew, but I mean, not everybody looking at me, they can't really work out what's going on here, other than the fact that my skin is brown. You know, to kind of circle back to something that you said it starts with leadership. And I think a practical thing that leadership does is uses words.
Right. Yeah.
Uses words. Now, I know words without action is really empty and seems dead, but you got to start somewhere, and it starts with words. And I think the problem is whether it is with Blue Lives Matter also, or whether it is with a social media post, ultimately words are a great beginning place. And what I found is I went through all of this. I know for a fact that I was judged harshly and treated harshly because of my color. I know it for a fact. People know that they can use the judicial system and they know they can use the political system to get a result that would treat a person of color completely different than if the roles were reversed. They're going to use it. They're going to use it.
Yeah.
And that was the experience that happened for me. And so I go through all of that. And when it comes to words, I came out, and I think one of the things that probably startled me the most was the inflections of voice, the subtle words of, "Yeah, I know your story, but what's the full story? But why? Or how did you end up in that situation?" And see, this is the problem, is the questions when people see these protests and see what's going on, or saw that video of George Floyd, is, "Oh, but what happened before that video?" And those are the wrong words. That's the wrong question.
Right. No, position of power. It's that position of instilling fear. And I think people don't understand, the impact that this has on, that, like you said, that scarred your parents, right?
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're coming to our country, bringing enterprise, bringing commerce. You're bringing, right, a business. You're bringing community impact. You're bringing, impact for me as an African American in America. You're bringing impact towards me and other people, for kids that they're not impacting, right? And losing sight of all that because of hatred, bigotry, and systemic mindsets that have needed to die for years. They weren't able to see the gift that you were creating and bringing to the table. And that's the thing that I think is so disheartening about this entire situation, is that people don't think about what the impact is on the economy, on the family, and on the community, because of the lack of leadership that continues to perpetually happen. When I talk to CEOs, and my thing that's so challenging is I've connected more CEOs, running $1 billion, $1 million companies than anybody. And it is, I don't have a lot of hope. My last corporate job, I dealt with a lot of people in the philanthropy space, right? That their whole job is to give away money. And I got ghosted. And I wasn't even asking them for money. Right? I mean, it's like the craziest thing. It's like, it's like one company, one organization I know is like they're trying to give away $1.3 billion, I think, something like that, before this guy dies. People have these initiatives where they try and give away all this money before they die or whatever. The whole organization is white to try and impact Black people. This stuff does not make sense. I'm like,
firstly, in America,
right.
When you're a person of color, you're guilty until proven innocent versus innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
He then goes into court. Let's just say he's convicted. Yep, charged, accepts, plead guilty. Now there's a sentencing guideline, and it can be anywhere from 3 months to 5 years. Now, the problem is that when you're a person of color, as I was treated when I was in there, you're suddenly thrown the book and told that your sentence is X, when a person who is not your color, is not from the part of town where you're from, is suddenly just treated, and, as we've just seen in America, a person who killed 8 people is taken to Burger King.
What people don't understand, like East St. Louis. So East St. Louis had riots in their history. Actually, big riots that was kind of, really, it was essentially the white community rioting and the Black community, where they took Black people and would throw them back into buildings that were burning. We're talking babies murdered. So the problem is, people look at this stuff and they think the looting and all this stuff, like, look at your history books, guys. This has been worse than this. I mean, this has been lynchings, and we are reliving these pieces that have happened in history. So the white community rioting on the Black community.
And that history is not very long ago.
It's not. Right. It's not. And so we think that that it's, whatever, 200 years ago. This is we're talking, I remember in high school talking, and this is in the 2000s. I don't know, probably 2007 or something like that. I remember talking to one of my teachers, and he talked about one of his Black friends running for his life from the KKK in 2003. This is in the 2000s, guys. You want to know how you can help? You can learn. This is how you can help. You can start to learn a history that has been dismissed from the class books. You can start to understand the Black experience. There's 2 books. There's one book that I read called Cry Like a Man. And it really goes into deep levels of understanding emotional empathy for people that have gone through so much trauma in the Black community, going back to your individual in that cell with you, he sold those 3 grams because he was trying to survive.
Correct.
East St. Louis, when those riots hit East St. Louis, the business and the economy was obliterated. There was no business. There was no places. So people started to survive. They started to survive through finding family in gangs.
Yeah.
Through finding economy through drugs. Right? So now the white people think, oh, well, that doesn't impact me. Well, yeah, it does, because now those drugs are going into schools, right? They're going into the white communities for the economy, because the economy is not deployed. So that's where it's being deployed, feeding on that system. Okay. So we all think like, this isn't, it's not attached to me. No, it is attached to you. It's not going to impact my kids. No, it is going to impact your kids.
Because my experience going through all of this, I lived what it's like to be treated that way. I think you come out of that situation, and I think this is probably what a lot of people who have been through experiences similar to me, you said a really key word before in that first book you were describing, is trauma. You've experienced trauma.
Yeah.
And living through these experiences is experiencing trauma. And for some reason, people are conditioned really well to deal with certain types of trauma. But this type of trauma, for some reason, I've heard this phrase recently, it's questioned and not believed. Yeah. And the discussion is about, is there hope? I don't think there's going to be much change until there's at least an acknowledgement of trauma. And that's probably a key part of dealing with somebody with trauma, is just listen, don't judge.
Yep.
Don't judge. Yep. Don't get all statistical. Don't get all, well, what happened and why? Or what part did you have involved in this? No, it's just listen to it.
Yeah, it's so true. I say, well, I wish I could say there's hope from there. I can't. I can't say I don't see hope on the Democratic side. I don't see hope on the Republican side.
Yeah,
I really don't. All I see the hope for is, what can I build to tell stories?
Yeah.
What can I build in entrepreneurship to give people jobs? What can I build in culture that changes people's lives? What art can I create that inspires people? That's so, my whole thing is, I'm like, I've been advocating and fighting for this for years. I don't blast it out on Facebook. I go into board meetings. I'm building relationships with people of power, and I'm being real, and I cannot be bought.